One of our goals for the Twin Club unit was learning about characters in a story. So we are going to be working on page 3 in your workbook, and let's find out what we need to do. Read the story and look at the picture to find out about the character, Mr. James. So let's find out about Mr. James. Mr. James has a shop on my corner. He sells bread and milk. He has a kind word for everyone who comes in his store. When it is hot, Mr. James makes ice cream cones. He gives them away to kids for a treat. Mr. James likes people, and people like him. So we can use what we've read in the story, and we can also use the picture. First thing we're going to do, circle the answer to each question. Which word describes Mr. Jones? Well, you know what? I read in the story that Mr. Jones has a kind word for everyone. Kind word. He gives away ice cream. People like Mr. James, and Mr. James likes people. So what word describes Mr. James? Mean or kind? Kind. Now we're also going to be talking about setting, and setting is where does the story take place? So I want you to think back to the story. Mr. Jones has a shop on my corner, and a shop is some place that you go to buy things. He sells bread and milk. So is the setting of the story a park or a store? Was there anything about a park in our story? Nope. It was all about a store, and it was about Mr. Jones having ice cream, and you can see he's standing in front of a storefront. On this one, we have to write our answer. Write your answer to each question. How does Mr. Jones feel about people? You know what? The last one says it all. Mr. Jones likes people, and people like him. So we are going to carefully copy this sentence onto the line. You might run out of room, but we'll try and fit it underneath here. So I'm just copying capital MR, Mr., and I think I keep saying Jones, but it's James. Mr. James likes people. Did we answer the question? How does Mr. James feel about people? Mr. James likes, I made a mistake. I need to go back and fix that. Good thing I read it again. Mr. James likes people. I'll put a period at the end. Okay, we have one more question. Why do you think people like Mr. James? Well, it told us in the story a few reasons why people like Mr. James. One of them was he has a kind word for everyone. That means he has something nice to say for everyone who comes into the store. Another thing, maybe why people likes Mr. James, is because he makes ice cream cones and he gives them away to kids for a treat. So let's try to figure out an answer here. Why do you think people like Mr. James? So there's a couple reasons, and you can pick one of those reasons. Okay, and I'm going to start with Mr. James, and our spelling's right here. And I'm going to go back up to my sentence. Mr. James, right here, I can just copy this, has a kind word for everyone. It means he's nice to everybody. Now, it wouldn't be incorrect if you said, why do you think people like Mr. James? If you said, Mr. James makes ice cream cones and gives them away to kids. You could write that. Mr. James makes ice cream cones, and then you'd have to put an and in here, and gives them away to kids. That would be okay too. Either one of those would work. There's no specifically correct or incorrect as long as it's in the story and as long as it explains why you think people like Mr. James. Okay, great job on character and setting.